Good morning. Almost untied myself here. So, I hope you all had an awesome holiday. I don't know if I'll get through this, which is partly why nobody should be here because it's unlisted. So, I know it looks like this is live, but it's really not going to be. I'm only recording it live so that I don't have to try to upload anything later. But I promised you that we were going to talk about the Yule Lads, and I was going to read my little story about the Yule Lads. And so that is what I want to try to do this morning before I get patients in. Yay! So I'm just looking for my last little Scully here, because apparently I'm not allowed to have my Scullies in the patient rooms, and I have to have them here in the back. Love it. Okay, so this is called the Yule Lads. This book happens to be by Brian Pilkington, and it says a celebration of Iceland's Christmas folklore. So that's where the Yule Lads come from, is from Iceland. And there's all kinds of really cute pictures in here about them. I hope your holidays have been great. Mine were pretty good, although too busy. I wish like when I was younger, I used to have a whole week off all the time between Christmas and New Year, and it's like you don't appreciate it till you have to work Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas and the day after that. It happens a lot. So it says, since the 19th century, when the first pagan settlers arrived in Iceland, there have been celebrations at the time of the winter solstice. The original pagan word for this period was Yule, which Jol, which is the Icelandic word still used today for Christmas. There are various speculations as to the origin of Yule in English, one that is linked to Yulner, one of the aliases for Odin, which I know I'm not saying that right, Pat, I'm sorry, father of the heathen Norse gods. Another is that it is related to the English word jolly. Well, jolly, the celebrations certainly were. In fact, the first mention of the word that we can find in Icelandic literature is a reference to a drinking Yule. Icelandic farmers would throw great banquets at this time of year in order to alleviate the monotony of the dark, frozen winters. That's true. The Alvin century saw the introduction of Christianity, and as the new religion slowly took hold, the Yuletide celebrations were gradually absorbed into the Christian tradition. But the jolly times carried on unabated until Reformation laws in the 16th century decreed that all disorderly and scandalous entertainment at Christmas and at other times and Shrovetide revels are strongly forbidden on pain of serious punishment. So they were trying really hard to get rid of the pagan celebrations. However, these threats did little to dampen people's spirits, and the revelry continued. There is a story that Hruni, in the south of Iceland, a whole church with all its partying congregation was sucked down into the bowels of hell as punishment for their misdeeds. This Puritanism was to last for 3 centuries until the middle of the 19th century saw a slow relaxation in the authorities' attitudes and a return to exuberant celebrations. So the first person or myth here that we're going to talk about is Grýla. So Grýla is the witch. The harshness of the winters and the poor and simple living conditions of the Icelanders, hang on here, that way you can see some of this while I'm doing this, over the centuries did not hinder the development of a fine literary imagination. As a result, Icelandic folktales are richly endowed with ogres, elemental beings, monsters, and their like. The most loathsome and hideous ogress of all is the giant troll Grýla. She first appeared in a 13th century manuscript, has made regular appearances since then, and is now an infamous figure familiar to all Icelandic children. There have been many different descriptions given of her over the years, each one more horrible than the last. And I just have to say again, when we were talking about Krampus, isn't it funny how American children, they get threatened with, either elf on the shelf, okay, who's going to tell Santa that they were bad and they might not get the presents they want, Well, that's really scary. Or just, Santa Claus in general. Oh, I'm going to tell Santa that you weren't very good and you won't get what you want. And then in the European countries and the traditions of old, they're told about this giant troll and Krampus who has great big horns. I wish I had been able to do this at home. I just haven't had time because my husband got me an incredible, real Krampus mask that I'll have to preview when I do my next live for y'all. It's really cool. But it's funny that's what children in the European countries are threatened with. We get nothing over here. As mother to the Yule Lads, Grýla plays an important part in Icelandic Christmas tradition. Apart from looking hideous, she has, it seems, a real craving for stewed child. Not just any old child, though. It has to be a naughty, lazy, or rude one. Over the years, she became quite handy to parents as a threat and was regularly used as a warning to badly behaved children, right? Grýla sets off as Christmas approaches, a sack over her shoulder. See this one here? Ravenous for naughty boys and girls. Whether she'll enjoy a feast or go hungry will depend on how good the little one's behavior has been over the past year. One story has her dying of starvation because the children have behaved so well, but she is born again, at least in stories, each and every Christmas, and will no doubt continue for many centuries to come. And not unlike the devil, Grýla has hooves instead of feet, though the devil's hooves are cloven. The official Icelandic word for icicle is Grýlukteri, or Grýla's candle. In some stories, Grýla is depicted as having 3 heads, each as ugly as the next. Eesh. Some trolls do have horns, while others go without. It is well documented that Grýla is blessed with horns. The ogress is recorded in the 13th century as having 15 tails. This later became 15 tails with 100 sacks on each and 20 children in each sack. This gives us some idea of her immense size. So she can carry many, many children. And Grýla has an eye in the back of her head. This enables her to keep a 360-degree lookout. The poor children don't stand a chance. So, Grýla's spouses. I love how she has more than one spouse. Over the many centuries of Grýla's existence, she has had any number of romantic dalliances, including an affair with Lucifer, but only 3 permanent relationships have been recorded. Her first spouse was known as Boli. Grýla, it is said, had many children with him. He lived to a ripe old age, and since he was a troll, this means we're talking about thousands of years. He was bedridden long before he eventually expired. About the second, very little is known. All that we can be sure of is his name was Gustur, and that when he died, Grýla ate him. Yummy. The third is the most famous, the father of the Yule Lads. He is still around, turns up every Christmas and goes by the name of Leipaludi. He is almost amiable compared to Grýla, but shares with his spouse a liking for stewed child. A lazy, slobbish, uncouth layabout. He allows Grýla to do all the scavenging for wayward children, while he puts his feet up and keeps the pot bubbling in anticipation of her return. Grýla overshadowed her spouses to such an extent that hardly any descriptions of them exist. All that we can be sure of is that they were giant troll-like creatures and not very easy on the eye. Whew, that's for sure. They are not pretty people, are they? Or pretty trolls. The fact that Grýla ate Gustur probably indicates that it was a difficult year for her. Too many good children. And then Boli was not a well troll. Poor thing, he suffered towards the end. So that one is Boli. That's the third husband there. So the Yule Lads evolution. The mother of the Yule Lads, Grýla, was not one for letting the grass grow under her hooves. and there are over 80 recorded offspring attributed to this lady. Whereas the character of the malicious, grumpy Grýla has changed little over the centuries, the nature of the Yule Lads has undergone quite a transformation. When first mentioned in the 17th century, they were described as evil ogres like their parents and were used for threatening or motivating lazy children. So much so that the authorities in 1746 felt it necessary to issue the following decree. So 1746, this is before 1776, when we gained our independence, right? The foolish custom which has been practiced here and there about the country of scaring children with Yuletide lads or ghosts shall be abolished. The 19th century saw them reduced to the 13 rascally petty pilferers that are recognized today. Their act has softened up considerably, and they have even stopped eating children altogether. In 1932, a small book of charming verses by Johannes or Koechlin was published called Yuletide is Coming. The verses told the story of Grýla and her family and were an instant success, remaining popular to this day. With the accompanying illustrations by Tryggvi Magnusson, they have gone a long way towards establishing the appearance and the character of Icelandic Yule family as we know them today. With their traditional shabby farm clothes and beards of various shades and sizes, the brothers have largely managed to fight off the foreign century, and much to the delight of children, the Yule Lads took up the custom of leaving small gifts. Obviously, Mr. Claus must take some of the credit for this trend. Instead of stockings on bedposts, Icelandic children leave shoes on their windowsills. One wonders what it is with Christmas gifts and footwear. Each of the Yule Lads sets off from the family home in the Highlands one after the other on the 13 nights before Christmas. Like Santa, they manage to cover the whole country, as well as delivering gifts to all the Icelandic children living abroad in a single night. No wonder they are hungry. So the first Yule Lad here is Stekkjarstaur, the sheep worrier. The first to arrive in city, town, and farmhouse is Stekkjarstaur, the sheep worrier. His chief characteristic is a gangly walk due to the stiffness in his legs. He is probably one of the older brothers and may suffer from a touch of rheumatism. He gets his name from his old habit of sneaking into the sheep cot, where, feeling rather thirsty after his long trek from the mountains, he would try to suckle from the ewes, but fail because he was too stiff to bend down. Now, it is doubtful whether sheep would yield any milk in the middle of December, which suggests his IQ could be somewhat less than 3 figures. Fortunately, in modern townhouses these days, there's no bending required, and he is quite happy to help himself to a glass of milk from the fridge. Stekkjarstaur, like his brothers, leaves a small toy, a piece of fruit, or something a little more sugary in each child's shoe, unless the child has been naughty, in which case all he or she receives is a potato. So that's Yule Lad number 1. Giljagar, Gullygawk, the second on the list of the benevolent hitmen. Another thirsty lad is Giljargar, the Gullygawk. In days gone by, this decidedly elusive character would travel under the cover of deep gullies and dark ravines, furtively skulking along until he reached a farmhouse. There he would sneak stealthily into the animal quarters and seclude himself until the milkmaid was distracted. Then he'd pounce upon the milk pail, first savoring the creamy froth on top, his favorite treat, before quenching his thirst with the fresh warm milk. These days he has no taste for the skimmed milks and sterilized stuff he finds at modern kitchens, but it is a case of make do or make without. Every old farmhouse would have been equipped with wooden containers of various sizes for the purpose of milk processing. Milk and all its byproducts, cheese, skyr, etc., were a vital source of nutrients in the past. Some of the finer establishments in the old days had stables under the living quarters. The farm animal's body heat rose to the floor and acted as a primitive form of central heating, supplying warmth and, no doubt, a certain pungent whiff. So, yay, having farm animals heat your house from underneath with their piles of poo. Yippee. Stubby. The runt of the litter, Stuffer or Stubby, is the third to arrive, and he is actually the first to set off. His little legs are so short and the snow is so deep that it takes him considerably more time and effort than his brothers to travel over the mountains. He is rather sensitive about his height or lack of it, as it is a cruel fate to be the shortest member of a family of trolls. You may not catch a glimpse of him on this particular night, as his size makes him adept at hiding, but the appearance of gifts the following morning is proof that he was there. He's another of the scroungers and hangs out around the kitchen to scrape whatever he can off pans that the occupants, for whatever reason, haven't managed to go around to washing. Note to children, if your shoe is in a high window, it is a good idea to put out a shoebox or a stool for Stuffer to stand on, because he's just too short to make it up onto those high windows. Stuffer's short legs make walking in soft snow a nightmare. And this gives some idea of Stuffer's size. The book he is standing by is the one you're holding. So Stuffer is about this tall. He's not very big. Oh boy. Sorry I'm butchering these names, guys. We're working on it. Pavor Sleeker, Spoon Licker. While the rich are said to be born with a silver spoon in their mouths, this character definitely got the wooden spoon. His lot in life is to loiter around dark kitchens, waiting for spoons to be set aside so that he can grab them and scurry back to his hiding place to enjoy them in peace. Anyone who has done any baking with children around will realize that wooden spoons don't stay sticky for long, and Pavor's Spoon Licker is a handy character to dump the blame on. But on the 15th of December, do him a favor and don't wash up the spoons, as he is awfully grateful for any sticky spoon-connected morsel that will help nourish his emaciated frame. Centuries of licking have given Spoon Licker an athletic and agile tongue. I'm not sure why we need to know that, but apparently there is a use for that for sure. Makes you wonder what the women know. Never mind. Spoons were crafted from cattle horn and stored between meals in elaborately carved boxes like the one above. So then we have pot liquor. It's a good job these lads arrive at daily intervals. Otherwise, there would be a calamitous free-for-all as they each head straight for the kitchens, suggesting that Icelanders might not be that prompt at doing the washing up. This suits pot liquor, as his preference is for licking the leftovers off the sides and bottoms of pans, and especially for nibbling at the crunchy hardened bits that collect around the rim. However, if he does come across a partly full pot, he won't hesitate to gorge himself greedily until he is stuffed. In certain parts of the country, it is said that the Yule Lads arrive not by way of the mountains, but by sea. So you can see up there. He's coming in by sea. All right, this sounds terrible when I'm trying to say it. Askaleaker. Which means bull liquor. But I'm going to show you. Askaleaker. Askaleaker bull liquor is the last of the liquors. His personal liking is for an asker, or traditional wooden bowl with a hinged lid. In the old turf houses, members of the household would each have their own personal asker. The lid helped to keep the food warm and presumably protected it from any household pets. That's a great idea. We should have those today, right? But it was no protection against bull liquor. He would hide under a bed, the bedroom doubling as a dining room in the small turf houses, waiting for the time when the dishes were set aside on the floor. Then, when the owners were distracted, he would sneakily snatch the dishes and lick them clean. How he manages these days, when the old-style asker sits unused in museums, is not recorded. Great attention was paid to detail in the construction of an asker. Each one was unique and often personalized with a name or initials along with the date it was made. So see how elaborate they are. They're really beautiful. I think we should reenact those askers. Then it says, the old turf houses tended to be tiny and cramped inside. It says a lot about Askaleaker's talent for concealment, that he could sneak in and out without being detected, for sure. Then we have Herdeskeeler, door slammer. Herdeskeeler or door slammer is a frustrated percussionist, loud and boisterous. He likes to creep in under cover of darkness as quiet as a mouse and then bang the door as loudly as he can just for the fun of it. He often rushes from door to door, slamming each in turn, pausing only to enjoy the squeaks and creaks of old, unoiled hinges. This, as you can imagine, is not altogether welcome when he arrives in the middle of the night and wakes the whole household. He is one of the only two brothers who are not totally obsessed with their stomachs. So here's door slammer. I hope we can get through this. Skygamer, Skyer glutton. First, it should be explained that Skyer is a dairy product, similar to yogurt, but made from separated milk. In the past, it consisted of straightforward curds, but these days is available in various tasty fruit flavors. In general, Skyer glutton has had a better time of it than most of his brothers, as there was almost always plenty of Skyer to be found in farmhouses in the past. In these days, most household fridges will contain a pot or two of strawberry peach or some other delicious Skyer concoction. Skyrgammer is renowned for being a glutton and will stuff himself until he is bursting at the seams. Great wooden barrels were made specially for the production of Skyer. All farmsteads would have one or more containing Skyer in various stages of readiness. So that's one, at least, that has continued today. So one of the Yule Lads, is still eating well. Boojnakerker. Yeah, no idea. Sausage stealer. In the olden times, buju, large sausages approximately 6 times the size of a hot dog, were hung in strings from the rafters out of reach of cats, dogs, and children. Although Boojkariker, or sausage stealer, is advanced in years, he is still nimble enough to climb stealthily up to the highest rafters. But these days, the chances are as slim as himself of finding any food hanging up there. He is more likely to find what he's looking for, vacuum packed in the fridge. Buju are still available in the shops, but the popular American hot dog is rapidly taking their place. Who knows, in years to come, Boojkariker might even be rechristened hot dog. Oh. It is easy to imagine Boojkariker getting carried away once he gets a whiff of a hot dog. Gluggagear, window peeper. Oh, great. The peeper, as tradition has it, is a very shifty character. He loiters around windows, peeping in when nobody is about. He is always on the lookout for little knickknacks that he can pilfer later on when everybody's tucked up in bed fast asleep. If a child catches him looking in, Gluggagear has a reputation for pulling funny faces to make himself look scary. This Yule Lad believes that fair exchange is no robbery, and as he always leaves presents and shoes, he considers a little pilfering perfectly acceptable. You can be sure he often gets the blame for any small objects that go missing at this time of year. For centuries, window peeping wasn't a problem, but with the advent of multi-story apartment blocks, Gluggagear has had to adapt to binoculars. It would perhaps take more than a grimace to frighten kids these days when they are used to Jurassic Park and the like. Window peepers. Get puffer, door sniffer. From far away over the mountains, Get puffer, or door sniffer, gets his first whiff of the sweet-smelling leaf bread being cooked. Even with his eyes closed, he is guided by his highly developed sense of smell towards kitchen doors, behind which Christmas delicacies are being prepared. Flour, until fairly recent times, was very much a luxury commodity in Iceland, and baking was kept for special occasions such as Christmas. Once he has sniffed his way to a kitchen, Gut Puffer genetic makeup means he is a compulsive cake thief, and when the opportunity arises, he never fails to take advantage. In the past, December 22nd was known as Hlakandi, Looking Forward Day, because it was around this day that children started to anticipate the arrival of Christmas. Great pains are taken in the making of loaf bread. a flour and water-based dough flattened into pancakes and deep fried. This is usually done just a few days before Christmas, with all members of the household helping to make the various intricate designs of puff bread. Ketrakur, meat hook. The penultimate Yule lad is most definitely a carnivore. Meat is what he likes, any sorts and lots of it. It was the simplest of exertions in days gone by to climb up to the roof of an old turf house. There, with the aid of a long, stout hook, Ketrakur would reach down this chimney and snag a hold of a leg of smoked mutton or any other meat that might be hanging from the rafters. Or he might have reached further down. No doubt he has, and still has, lots of implements for different situations, to hook a morsel from a pot cooking on the hearth. It was customary in the olden days to eat smoked lamb on St. Porkeler's Day, December 23rd. However, these days it's possibly a foil to Ketrakur. A tradition from the West Iceland has become more generally accepted, that of eating skate on this day. The large flat fish is hung for quite some time until gamey, which means it has a most unappetizing odor. This dish is decidedly an acquired taste. Quite what Meat Hook thinks of the new development, nobody knows. Smoked leg of lamb is most certainly a firm favorite with Ketrakur. 5 years after his death, Porlakur Porlesen, the 12th century bishop of Skaholt, was declared a saint by the Icelandic parliament. However, this went unrecognized by the Vatican for centuries. It wasn't until Pope John Paul II visited the country in 1985 that he was belatedly appointed patron saint of Iceland. For a nation of fishermen, cod liver oil lamps were for many centuries the cheapest and most readily available form of lighting. Doing good, I hope. Kurtzenicker, candle beggar. The tradition of giving lavish gifts at Christmas is a relatively recent one. However, the giving of candles on the 24th of December stretches back for centuries, a fact of which the last of the Yule Lads is well aware. Before the advent of electricity, children used candles to brighten up the darkness in celebration of Christmas, but the hungry candle beggar would have devoured any he could lay his hands on. In those days, the candles were made of tallow, which is animal fat, which, while not exactly delicious, was at least edible and would have helped keep a wiry Yule lad warm on his long journey back to the mountains. These days, Kurtzenicker is still an avid collector of candles, but he has to satisfy his nutritional needs by other means. King's candles. You see, this is King's candles. King's candles, triple tallow candles were made at Christmas to represent the Magi, or three wise men, who came to pay homage to the infant Jesus, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Candles still have a significant role to play at Christmas time in Iceland, especially since the relatively recent introduction of the North European Advent crown. One candle is lit on each of the 4 Sundays preceding Christmas. So the Advent crown. Whereas Christmas officially starts for much of the Christian world at midnight on Christmas Eve, in Iceland it begins with a flourish of church bells at 6 p.m. on the 24th of December. After a hearty meal of most typically smoked lamb or ptarmigan, presents are opened. And finally, the Yule Cat. As if Grýla and her mischievous offspring were not enough, the poor Icelandic children have to contend with Yule Cat as well. A grossly overgrown house cat turned feral. It is cold, mean, and ravenous. Instead of hunting mice like normal-sized felines, it preys upon children, but not just any children. The Yule Cat is quite discerning, choosing only those who haven't recently been given something new to wear. It skulks across the frigid winter landscape, its yellowy green eyes glowing in the dark. Its teeth are sharp and its claws drawn ready to pounce on any poor, unsuspecting children whose uncaring parents have failed to provide them with a fresh item of clothing for Christmas. Nobody knows where it comes from or where it goes, but on Christmas Eve, when the candles were lit, the Yule Cat would peer through the window. If it saw each child of the household clutching a parcel or containing something to wear, it would hiss and scowl and continue on its evil way. Keeping warm in the Icelandic winter was, and it still is, the number one priority. Children in the not-so-distant past were called upon to help with the preparation and production of new garments. The spinning, weaving, knitting, and sewing were performed to some extent by children. Until fairly recently in Iceland, all clothing came direct from the sheep. The wool had to be washed, combed, and spun before it was painstakingly crafted into a garment. It was a long, arduous process. To make sure the children worked hard and concentrated while they all huddled around the light of a meager flame, adults would put the fear of God into them with horrific tales of the Yule Cat. Again, something interesting to scare children with. Where is it? One wonders whether a similar ploy would produce results with today's homework. These days, every good Icelandic parent still makes sure that at the very least there's a new pair of socks or gloves for the kid at Christmas time, just in case. Because on long, dark, windy winter nights, a faint, sinister caterwauling can sometimes still be heard. So you see how big Yule Cat really is. He's huge and evil. The Icelandic winters can sometimes dump an accumulated snowfall several meters deep, capable of covering homesteads and at times whole villages without a trace. And in the past, some of the more isolated farms would have been cut off for months on end. So they definitely needed new clothes. And there is one of the Yule Lads and the witch Grýla herself and one of her husbands. So yay, we finally get the story of the Yule Lads. I'm so glad you joined me. I hope that your holiday was wonderful and that you're all getting ready for New Year's. I'm sure I'll be doing a video tonight, so I look forward to that. Until then, I love you guys.